Good morning from Pittsburgh. This is the Steelers Roundtable, coming at you every Thursday, 9 to 10 a.m. here at TribLIVE Studio, 6th floor. Nice cold one here in Pittsburgh today, alongside Chris Adamski and Ralph Polk. I guess the season's over, Buzz. I guess the biggest question going in now is, in my eyes, was, do you deem this season as a success? And it's kind of strange because it was 2 or 3 weeks ago, we're firing Mike Tomlin, we're getting rid of this, we're getting rid of that, we're not signing this guy, it's just an absolute mitigated disaster. I haven't heard much of that following that 23-16 loss in Denver, where I was and you weren't, on Sunday. I find it hard to get myself to believe that this is anywhat of a failed season when you look at it. I mean, we don't have to go over the next man up concept of the players. I mean, my goodness, you can. Everybody knows about everybody who's missed, including a couple big ones in Antonio. Was that, in your minds, Buzz, the reason why people have probably deemed this as a success, because you're within 3 minutes of making it to the AFC Championship game and you don't have Antonio Brown and D'Angelo Williams? I think a lot of people actually might be using their head this time around.
Well, as I said Sunday night on the TV show where I was and you weren't.
No, I was not.
Listen, getting to the final 8 of the playoffs, all right, there aren't many times you could say that's a failure of the season, all right? There are 2 games away from the Super Bowl, 2 wins away from the Super Bowl, 2 games away from winning the Super Bowl, playing in the Super Bowl for sure, not even accounting for the injuries at that point. There's only one of 16 teams that can win in a conference every year, one of 32 that can win the Super Bowl every year. Now, yes, that doesn't really break down exactly how you look at it, but how you look at any individual season, but there is an element of Steelers fans are spoiled to the point of not having a losing record now for 12 years and counting, and you would think that would probably extend next year, although you never know, I guess. You get to the playoffs, you're right. If they didn't make the playoffs, but even then being 10-6, what they had to deal with. Now, there's a point, though, where you're going a little bit too, blaming the injuries, talking about the injuries. Remember, the team they beat in the playoffs didn't have its starting quarterback, for one thing. Denver lost its starting quarterback. There's 2 safeties were hurt when they played here in December, and if you don't win that game, you don't get in the playoffs. New England was down Edelman and Gronkowski for a lot of the season. Every team, it's cliche, every team has injuries. I know some are affected more than others. You can go back and forth and try to do it. It was the point where it got a little bit ridiculous, a little bit absurd by the time you got to not having the team MVP available, being on the 3rd and 4th string running backs. Everybody talks about the 4th kicker, the quarterbacks they used, the left tackle, center, and everything else. But you'd probably be surprised that there are teams that had holes in other areas because of injury. So I don't even like to account for the injuries. I just think getting to when you have franchises and quarterbacks and organizations right now where Denver and New England are, to be a half step behind them, a little bit of to not make it one fewer round than them doesn't really reflect poorly on you and your season, I believe.
Yeah, I mean, I got a good perspective out of the Denver locker room. And I think that's why, in Denver with the Steelers locker room, they were very upset. And I've been doing this since 2003, since our last winning season, or last losing season, I guess. Yeah. That was my first full-time season, so that was a fun what that was they weren't totally eliminated in 2003 until like week 16, so it was like going back and forth, whatnot. But my point is, I've never seen a bunch of grown men, professional athletes, take a loss as hard as that, including the head coach. I'm going to get your perspective the next day. I'll tell you my perspective the day of, minutes of. I mean, when you see your head coach, probably the guy who projects the most toughness out of anybody on that team and that organization, have a tough time getting through a post game conference media session because he's tearing up a little bit. I truly believe that was just because of everything they went through over this year to get to this point. I mean, he even said a little bit yesterday, the 4 kickers, and you go on and on. I mean, we forget all about the suspensions now. I mean, you had Martavis out for 4/5 games to start the season. You had Le'Veon Bell out as well, and a couple early injuries early. And I think that's what the emotion came. I mean, Mike Mitchell, very emotional. Cam Hayward was there. I mean, Stephon Tuitt looked like he wanted to rip somebody's head off. And it really took me back to how emotional these guys were in this locker room. It might have been partly because they thought they had this game in hand with 6-7 minutes left and Toussaint fumbling the ball, but I think it had a lot to do with what they overcame to get to this point. That was 20 minutes after the game. You were there, 18 hours after the game? Was there any difference in the locker room the next day? And locker room clean out where they really don't clean out their lockers, but we call it that day.
It was, I think, a lot of that, and you could probably speak better than I could for Sunday night, was they really seemed to rally around Fitzgerald Toussaint because of the fumble, and I think there was emotion involved with that.